passed new laws to enable a national gun buyback and tighten background checks for gun licenses in response to the country's worst mass shooting in decades at a Jewish festival last month. Danish soldiers have arrived as part of the Arctic endurance military exercise in Greenland's Kangerlussuaq, as US President Donald Trump intensified his push to wrest sovereignty over the Arctic island from fellow NATO member Denmark. Hundreds of protesters take to the streets in Atlanta to mark Dr. Martin Luther King's Day and call attention to what they see as ongoing social injustices and Trump's anti-immigrant crackdown. At the World Economic Forum in Davos, a meeting was held between Oman's economy minister Dr. Said Mohammed Al-Sakri and Hong Kong's Financial Secretary Paul Chan-mo-po. They have said financial market connectivity between Hong Kong and Oman could boost mutual growth and called for stock exchanges and regulators to explore cooperation. US President Donald Trump and Syrian President Ahmad al-Jarrah held a phone call where US has shown support to Syria's territorial unity, protect Kurdish rights within the Syrian state, while both expressed a shared vision for Syria, while the Gulf Cooperation Council and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan called the move essential. Jordan's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi has held separate phone calls with Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan and Turkish Foreign Minister. The UAE's Ministry of Defense has denied Yemeni government claims that it operated secret prisons or stored weapons at Riyadh airport in Yemen, calling the allegations as misinformation, as the UAE claims that its forces completed a full and public withdrawal from Yemen on January 2nd of this year. According to Kabul's police, at least 7 people were killed and more than a dozen wounded in a suicide bomb attack at a Chinese restaurant in Kabul, with police confirming the dead included 1 Chinese national and 6 Afghans, while the Afghan branch of Islamic State claimed responsibility. Now we start, as there will be a solution to be found. Besant has also said that he is confident that the leaders will not escalate and will work out in a manner that ends up in a very good place for all. Let's listen into what Besant has said.
I just want to say this is a false narrative that there is no talk in European governments. This was a report written by Deutsche Bank that this could happen. The media has latched onto this. I think it is a completely false narrative. The market in the world are the best G7 performing bond market, and we had the best performance since 2020. It is the most liquid market. It is the basis for all financial transactions, and I am sure that the European governments will continue holding it. And as I said, I think everyone needs to take a deep breath, do not listen to the media, who are hysterical, just like they were, just like you all were. Let's just go back to what happened after April 2nd, hysteria. And what happened? We had the fastest stock market recovery in history. So I think these false narratives ignoring the media.
And so just to follow into that, so you do not believe that the EU or the UK have any retaliatory financial instruments or measures in their bag that the United States should be worried about?
No.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Ms. Alison Mutler. She's a former AP Bureau Chief in Romania, joins us live from Bucharest. Thank you very much, Ms. Mutler, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now looking at this, thank you. Now looking at this, how do you analyze, that is this actually really, they're thinking to buy Greenland, and they think this is the best solution?
I think what's happened is that Scott Bessent, he's in Davos at the moment, with a meeting of world leaders, movers and shakers, important people, business people, financial people. I think he's been sent to pour oil on the troubled waters to calm down the situation, to take things down a notch, because Donald Trump has been saying some pretty unprecedented things about acquiring Greenland, about imposing tariffs on European countries that don't accept his bid to acquire Greenland. But the bottom statements and rattles the markets. Scott Bessent, who's the US State Treasury, is trying to be the voice of calm, the voice of reason, and of course doing, a typical Trump thing, blaming the media. But the media just reports what the US president and others say. But he is coming forward as like, we'll be okay in the end. It's not in nobody's interest. So he's trying.
Today heard from NATO's leader, Mark Rutte. He seemed to have a softer tone and saying that, he had more, how do I say, he said him and Trump held a phone call, and then Trump said it was a good conversation. So how do you analyze what role does NATO chief play in this?
NATO chief Mark Rutte actually plays quite an important role. He himself, he's Dutch. When the issue of the United States needing is NATO so weak? And in the end, he did say something, but he is trying to preserve his good personal relationship with Donald Trump and also playing the part of a mediator and a pacifier. He does not want he's the head of NATO. He doesn't want an intra-NATO conflict, rivalries. It doesn't help NATO. So his job is to keep the ship steady, if you like, and to preserve his good relationship with Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump appreciates the fact that he doesn't come out and make harsh statements like perhaps Emmanuel Macron or other presidents, which they're absolutely entitled to do, and they should do. But Rutte is the head of a big defensive military alliance, and his role is to keep that military defense alliance, NATO, which has guaranteed peace in Europe for 80 years, to keep it together. And at this moment, this means having a good, solid, non-volatile relationship with the President of the United States.
Right. And what cards can NATO technically play here? And also the fact that, World Economic Forum is ongoing, and a lot of leaders, Western leaders are there. Are they trying to keep peace because right now they have this World Economic Forum that's ongoing?
I think they want to project a message of stability, of cooperation to acquire Greenland. But I think there'll be a lot of discussions going on behind the scenes. I'm sure Scott Bessent has an important role to play. He knows the president's mind. He knows what the president wants. And he probably has some idea, perhaps, what Europe can do. And European leaders will also be discussing behind the scenes. So I think there'll be a lot of discussions we won't necessarily find out about some kind of solution to this issue of Greenland. Because Donald Trump has said some very provocative things. It's not the first time about China and Russia being about to sort of grab Greenland, which is not true. But obviously in the long term, that could be a possibility. So I think Davos will be a time, I think it's not in the US or European or any of NATO members' interest to have frictions and to risk pulling the alliance apart, which I think nobody really wants.
Right. Thank you very much, Ms. Mutler, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving to Ukraine and Russia, power has been restored to 160,000 households in Kyiv after widespread outages caused by Russian airstrikes. However, the emergency crews have worked tirelessly in freezing temperatures to repair the damage. Kyiv's mayor Vitaly Klitschko has condemned Russia's barbaric attacks, which have left residents without power and warmth in the city's coldest winter in years. Despite the restoration, the repair work is ongoing, and authorities have urged people to limit electricity use to avoid further strain on the grid. However, the energy crisis that have been worsened by Russian strikes continues to disrupt daily life in Ukraine's capital. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Ms. Alison Mutler. She's a former AP Bureau Chief in Romania, joins us live from Bucharest. Thank you very much, Ms. Mutler, for staying with us. As you know, you were highlighting and we were talking about how European leaders are trying to see what they can do right now and show a unified front. What about towards Ukraine and Russia right now? What's their stance? How aligned are they, and what can European leaders do?
Well, generally speaking, European leaders, NATO members, most of which are NATO members, but not entirely, are allied on Russia. There are some exceptions like Hungary and Slovakia, which are much more Russia-friendly. but if you like, the more powerful economically and politically nations like France, like Germany, and also like Italy and the UK, which is not in the EU, but it is in NATO and an important member of NATO, and it has an important transatlantic alliance with the United States. They are behind Ukraine. They support Ukraine. Their eye has been taken off the ball with all this fiasco over Greenland at the moment, but they will want, again, behind the scenes to be, and publicly as well, offer their support, and that is politically but also militarily, to Ukraine, and that now is the war is about to enter, I think it's fifth year now, fourth year, and they see Ukraine as defending Europe from possible Russian expansion, and Ukraine is having a horrible winter with all these strikes on energy infrastructure, which it's been a very, very cold winter in this part of Europe, and it's like -14, I think, today. So these people without water, without heat, and that obviously damages morale, and it wears people down, and that is Russia's aim, and European leaders are trying to counter that.
Right. And do you think U.S. is still interested in mediating between Russia and Ukraine? And do you think European leaders are becoming, I don't know, in peace or open to the idea of talking directly with Russia because of, like you said, Greenland fiasco?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think I read the other day that the European Union wanted to appoint somebody who would actually negotiate or discuss directly with the Kremlin. So yes, I mean, I think, United States, Donald Trump did have rounds and rounds of talks over many, many months, and they've proved very difficult, intractable. It wasn't even Gaza was easier. The Middle East was easier for Donald Trump. So I think he got a bit, I don't want to say bored with that, but he found the problem too difficult to solve. He said what he had to say, and then he's turned his eye to Greenland, to Venezuela, to other issues. So at the moment, the Ukraine file, as they say, the Ukraine-Russia conflict is really not high on his radar, but for Europe, it is. It's just not been in the headlines as much, apart from today with these terrible strikes on Kiev and elsewhere in Ukraine. It's not been on the headlines because we've had new stories emerging with Greenland, but Europe does seem to be moving towards direct negotiations with Moscow, and meanwhile Russia is staging relentless attacks on Ukraine in the middle of winter. So Russia does not seem at this point at all prepared to make any concessions.
And lastly, some of our guests have said that U.S. is strategically doing all this to dismantle NATO, but some of our guests on the other hand have said that no, U.S. is doing this so that NATO countries will be alert about the strategic importance of Greenland. What do you think is U.S.'s strategy?
Hard to say. Donald Trump does, his modus operandi is one of surprise, as we saw in Venezuela. As Scott Bessent said, everybody calm down. It's possible he is trying to, and this would be best case scenario for the Western Alliance, it's possible he's trying to to make NATO aware of its strategic importance and come to some solution with European nations, which is what Bessent suggested today. Or it is possible he's no great fan of any international organization, be that NATO or the UN. That said, he's not a fan of leaving these organizations because that means that the US has less power. So it's not entirely clear what Donald Trump wants at the moment. But if we take Scott Bessent's remarks into account today, perhaps they're trying to work, I don't know what the US wants to play a greater role there. I don't know how they would acquire Greenland. I don't think Donald Trump wants to invade Greenland. But he definitely wants the United States to have an important stake there. Whether something can be worked out with European nations, obviously that would be in everybody's interest. Well, it wouldn't be in everybody's interest because Greenland does not want the US there. That's what the majority of the residents say. And Denmark does not want to cede power. But, things do change, and they might have to for the sake of greater stability and peace.
With that, I would like to thank Ms. Alison Nuttler for joining us from Bucharest and sharing that insight with us on NewsX World. Now we move on to Middle East. According to reports, Israeli bulldozers began demolishing structures at the headquarters of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, in East Jerusalem. The Israeli Foreign Ministry has defended the demolition, saying that UNRWA operations had already ceased at the site with no UN personnel or activities remaining. The ministry has also emphasized that the seizure of the compound was in line with both Israeli and international law. Israel has long accused UNRWA of providing cover for Hamas militants, alleging that some of its employees were involved in the October 7, 2023 attack on Israel, which triggered the ongoing war in Gaza, and the allegations that UNRWA rejects. Now we move on to our next news. Negotiations between Syria's President Ahmad al-Sharaa and Mazloum Abdi, head of the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, have collapsed, a Kurdish official has told AFP. The talks held in Damascus broke down entirely, with the Kurds blaming the central government for the failure. The official has called for a firm and decisive response from the international community to address the situation and urged urgent intervention to prevent further instability. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Sol Sadka. He's a political commentator, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Mr. Sadka, for joining us once again. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Thank you. Now looking at this, can you tell us the significance of this, the talk for the future of that region, but instead it has collapsed?
Well, look, the situation with the Kurds has been continuing for a century or more, since the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. And what remains of it, Turkey, has a very strict interest in ensuring that there is no Kurdish independence, because 20 to 25% of their population are Kurdish, and the Kurds, in theory, would like to have their own independent state. And if they get such a state, be that in Syria, or in Iraq, or in Iran, then the likelihood is that that would provide a base for which they will be able to fight against the Turkish state. Turkey, over the next 50 years, is going to be facing its primary problems in its east, where the growing Kurdish population are likely to provide a level of insurgency. So they are very interested in ensuring that the Kurds do not have any kind of independence, particularly in Syria. Lawless, broken Syria that is now controlled by al-Jilani and his regime. Now that regime is very much supported by the Turks. It's the Turks that armed them. It was the Turks that allowed them and pushed them forward to make that blitzkrieg run across the main cities of Syria slightly more than a year ago. And they are propping them up. So the real goal, as far as Turkey was concerned, was to have exactly what we're seeing now. To have those Turks was to roll the Kurds into a kind of united Syrian army. But that was never going to work. Even if there would be a temporary agreement to that effect, it won't, because they know, and we've seen it even over the past weeks, that these people want to kill them and have been doing this unrelentingly for decades. By the British and the French more than a century ago would understand that these borders are chaos borders and will lead to continual civil war and clans split up into its ethnic divisions. There should be a Kurdish state, there should probably be a Druze state and an Alawite state and a Sunni Arab state, or some kind of federation. Pandemonium in Syria, continuing ethnic violence all across the board.
And Mr. Sadka, what is the proof or Turkey doesn't want this alliance to succeed? Because Turkey is right there. It affects.
The main thing that it worries about in Syria, by far, Syria has minimal natural resources. It has some oil, but that is all broken and needs billions, tens of billions to repair. What they're interested in Turkey is they're interested in that is really towards that goal.
So what cards can Ahmad al-Sharaa realistically play here? Because eventually, or at the end of the day, these
is really unclear. There's nothing that really can be done. While Syria remains a ethnic and cultural patchwork of various rival factions, that absolutely hate each other and have been ethnic patchwork. It will not work, and it's a recipe for continual misery and civil war. There was a 50-year break of ethnic and clan violence under the Assad regime. Ahmed al-Jarrah cannot do that. Even with Turkish help, he won't be able to do that. So what you will have is continual war, which is probably what the Machiavellian people in charge of Turkey is absolutely at the core, the heart of the matter, and the reason the Turks supported al-Jarrah in 2024 when he took over the country.
With that, I would like to thank Mr. Solsadka for joining us from. The program has reached new heights with 4 successful long-duration balloon flights over Antarctica, from detecting an antimatter to tracing elusive neutrinos. These sky-high laboratories are helping long-duration scientific balloons. The latest campaign, managed by the Wallops Flight Facility in Virginia, saw 4 balloons ascend from the Ross Ice Shelf near McMurdo Station during December and January. These balloons, some of the size of football stadium, carried advanced us. The key mission GAPS was launched on December 15. The goal of the mission was to detect antimatter particles entering Earth's atmosphere. Another highlight of the campaign was the payload for ultra-high energy observations. The PO mission is designed to detect signals from neutrinos, ghostly subatomic particles that can travel billions of light years without being absorbed or deflected. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates.